Hi, everyone, and welcome to a best practice blueprint to buy cars on the money from any channel. This automotive news webinar is brought to you by Cox Automotive. We're delighted you're with us for this presentation. I'm Emma Hancock, host, strategist, and moderator at Automotive News. Before I introduce our speaker today, a navigation tip. We encourage you to ask questions at any time. Just type them into the Q&A box on the left side of the webinar window and then hit send. I will steer your questions to our speaker toward the end of the session. Today's speaker is Patrick Janes, Senior Director of vAuto Strategic Planning for Profit Time GPS, Provision, and Conquest, vAuto's new and used vehicle management solutions. Micah Tindor couldn't be with us today, but we're in very good hands. So now we'll turn it over to Patrick, just Patrick, to get us started.
Well, thanks, Emma. I appreciate it. Yeah, I just wanted to throw these pictures up here because clearly Micah is younger. He's smarter, just to throw that in there. I know that for sure. And arguably better looking than I am. So I apologize that you're going to have to just deal with me today, but Micah's a little under the weather. So I'm going to take us through the entire presentation. And I hope we've got some exciting stuff for you to apply in your business today. So, you know, the car market obviously isn't quite what it used to be, right? So we went through a period of time that we were able to buy cars easily from a supply perspective. They were readily available. And, you know, we had low interest rates for buyers and low floor plan interest rates for the dealership, right? And those minimizing those carrying costs. We didn't really need a super crisp plan to acquire from any channel. I mean, most dealers just said, hey, I got plenty of trades coming in, and every once in a while I got to go to the auction to supplement that inventory. But while that was happening, I think it's important to mention that there were some folks, we'll call them the disruptors, that were working under the radar, if you will, to kind of come up with a scheme to pull a lot of those cars away from us right out of our customers' driveway. So we'll talk a little bit about that and how we got to start working to combat that. But I want to go through a few industry numbers here just to kind of, you know, get the landscape of what's going on. First of all, there's a lot of volatility still in the wholesale market. And it's really much harder to be on the money, as we titled this presentation, month to month. Because you can see over on the far right-hand side of this chart, this is the MMR Manheim market report. And this is the index. And you can see is really jumped up and down and been a little sporadic. So it's really difficult these days if you were just to go to auction, right, which is what this is really tracking is auction values. And if you only had one single channel to source your supplemental inventory beyond the trades that you got, you would realize that that's a little trickier to do today because those values are all over the place and most people don't want to pay the money that they have to. So the other thing is that off-lease cycle, right? We used to rely as franchise dealers on those cars coming into our doorstep, and we would have those folks ground those leases, and then they were a nice supply of inventory for us. And we all know what's happened there. You know, most of those folks have figured out that they can buy those cars. The question is, are they buying them and flipping them to someone else? Or at least they're buying them for themselves because they have some serious equity in them. Now, when we talk about tight supply, I think this graph shows it pretty well, right? So there's just 16% fewer cars in the wholesale market than there was a year ago, right? So as a result, there's just fewer cars floating around, whether you're trying to find them at auction or wherever you're trying to track them down. And I would also note there's about 250,000 less retail units available so far this year. And what I mean by that, in other words, the number of used vehicles online, listed online, is down about 9%. So it's definitely a supply constrained market. And we got to work a little bit harder to find the inventory we need because fortunately, demand is still fairly strong. So if we want to meet the needs of these customers that are out looking for these cars, we got to source them. And speaking of retail demand, at the same time, it's hard to find cars. That retail demand has started to come down a little bit. All right. So we've seen sales this year down, used car sales down 3%. But I'll tell you what, given the affordability headwinds that we have, the way car payments have rose, the uncertainty about the economy, I think we can all be happy that down 3% isn't a bad place to be. As a matter of fact, January and February were quite strong. So that has kind of carried us through here a little bit. But certainly we're getting a few less at-bats with the customers that are out there today. I mentioned affordability earlier, and let's just go ahead and define what I mean by affordability. So today's used car customer is paying more on a monthly basis than what they paid for a new car, what they would pay as a new car customer 3 or 4 years ago. So get that, right? As a used car customer, my payment's higher than what I would have been if I were to be a new car customer 3 or 4 years ago. So yes, interest rate has had an impact. We know inflation has had an impact. We know that all of this has driven prices up, and it's kind of lowered the consumer's buying power. And if you track vehicles by price bucket, we've seen a spike in demand of those under $25,000 cars on the used car market. Why? Because there aren't any new cars under $25,000. So if that's where they have to go to be able to find an affordable vehicle, that puts them square in the used car market. And those are can be even more tricky to source since everybody wants those cars for payment drivers. We also know that Gen Z and millennial buyers, their average credit score is around 660. So they don't quite have the strength to get the best rates that we would see in today's used car market with the interest rates up. So you'll see there on the screen that used car payment at $594 and that new car payment at $784. Pretty steep, right? So I'm an old guy. So those are like mortgage value payments back in my day. So this is definitely an affordability challenge. So we got to be really smart with the cars that we're bringing into inventory. So what we see is this tension, if you will, across all these channels. And I will start, I'll go down each of these channels. I want to make sure you know what they are, and we want to identify them for you. And I use the word channel and source interchangeably. So the first channel I'll address is that lease return. And I mentioned it a little bit earlier, really due to lack of other options when people are bringing in a lease vehicle because maybe there wasn't a nice new car lease to roll back into. We have seen those folks just flat buy them, right? And again, I just want to reemphasize that customer coming in to purchase their lease car, we tend to kind of, treat them a little less, a little less standard than we might someone who's actually coming in to buy a car from us, right? Where we have some profit opportunity. I really caution against that because these folks, one, would like to trade up. They would like to get into another vehicle. They just can't help themselves that they got $4 or $5, $6 grand of equity in that car that they currently are. And the other piece of this is we want to make sure, in fact, that they are buying that car and going to hang on to it and drive it. Has someone already got to them and said, listen, go ahead and go back to the dealer, buy your car, and then flip it to me because I'll give you X amount of dollars for it, and then we'll do another transaction. So being friendly and accommodating to these folks, I think is really critical. Two, the service drive, all right? Huge opportunities here. We'll talk in detail in one of our best practices later, but I just got to say this, sending your salesperson down to the customer lounge to talk to service customers is not a strategy when it comes to actually going after and trying to find cars in your service drive. So let's be sure we recognize that. Three, trade-ins, obviously the bloodline of our used car inventory. New vehicle inventory is improving, so that's good. But again, everybody's trying to get to that customer before they're considering a trade. The Carvanas, the CarMaxes, they're all after them. So we have to make sure that we're protecting those opportunities of those customers that are raising their hand and saying, I'm about ready to trade a car. And then in number 4, which is that auction, which we talked about, those wholesale volatility, we did see in June probably the largest depreciation in used car values that we've seen all year and in some time. So I do believe that there's some relief coming on these wholesale values at auction. which may help us out a little bit in going back to that channel in the second half. And then finally, the KBB ICO, or the instant cash offer leads. And this could be Kelley Blue Book. It could be any trade-in lead that you're able to get your hands on. I would just say, remember that these leads typically go to more than one dealer. So it's important for you to identify which of these cars that you get leads on are the most important to you, right? Which one fits your needs? Which are the cars you need? Which are the cars you make the most money on? Identify those cars, because those are the ones you want to be most aggressive on trying to acquire as you're working these leads. So this is a survey that NADA does every year. Where are the cars in a typical dealer's inventory, be a franchise dealer's inventory, come from, right? So on the left-hand column is the survey from NADA. On the right-hand column, we did our own survey at vAuto just to kind of, check and balance here a little bit with their numbers. And remarkably, they synced up pretty well. So we feel real confident that this is a pretty standard sourcing, how dealers currently get their source of used vehicles. So 41% trade-in on new vehicles, no surprise there. Trade-in on used vehicles, about 25% or so. In our survey, we actually saw that number go up a little bit higher. People were getting more trades on used vehicles. The one auction purchases run about 17%. We saw that range as high as 25% in some cases, where dealers are real aggressive at auction, and a little bit lower. But the one I want to call out here is that street purchase. I remember sharing this survey probably 3 years ago, and that number, according to NADA, was around 4%. So there has been a real aggressive move and shift amongst all dealers to go after more street purchases, setting up buying centers. And if you haven't jumped into that game, I highly encourage that you start doing that. As a matter of fact, CarMax's quarterly report, which I just read a while ago, said that 87% of their vehicles in inventory come from either a trade-in on a used vehicle or they buy them off the street. 87%. So that means they aren't necessarily your competitor in the lane anymore against auction vehicles. They are self-sustaining themselves and doing a really good job of buying cars off the street. And so therefore, there's quite the opportunity for franchise dealers as well, in my mind. And I also noted that they bought 327,000 cars in the first quarter from consumers. That's CarMax alone. So big numbers there happening. So let's talk about this omni-channel approach, right? So I used to call this multi-channel, and then my marketing folks said, no, we got a cooler word. It's called omni-channel. So I had to look it up, figure out the definition. I get it now, right? So the difference between multi-channel, which means, hey, let's go after all these sources that I laid out to you. There's all sorts of them to go after, service drive and lease returns and all that. Those are multi-channels that we want to really go out and appraise each and every one in each bucket. The word omni-channel, the difference means it's integrated. And they use this in marketing a lot. It's an integrated approach. So it's this idea of collectively looking at all that inventory across all those sources and then coming up with a strategy to go find the best cars in each of those sources. So you're going to hear a lot about omni-channel sourcing moving forward, because we got some really cool technology coming that's going to help you do this at vAuto. So I'm really excited about that, and we're getting close to bringing that out in the marketplace. But I think, typically when I talk to a dealer today, they say, well, I've got a guy that appraises service cars. Great. All right, I got an internet manager that appraises KBB instant cash offer leads or trade-in leads. I got a gal that appraises private party listings. So we've got someone doing each of those channels. Again, omni-channel would say, how can we collectively aggregate all that and go across all of them? And then also be more consistent in determining what we're willing to pay across all those channels. Now, this is a snapshot of the top 10 dealers on Profit Time GPS inside of vAuto. And you're going to get an idea of what kind of channels that they're working. In that system, we have the ability to report back where they're getting their cars and from each channel. You'll see the channels or the sources across the top: auction, dealer trades, ICO, lease return, service drive. So we've identified all that. And then you see 10 rooftops along the left-hand side there. And you'll see some interesting variety there. But the key is, so I think when we look at this, we are what the new approach is we don't want any zeros, all right, in any of those columns. Again, we're looking for that multi-channel, omni-channel approach where each one of these sources means something to us, and we're out with a strategy to be able to acquire these cars, and a balanced approach is what's key. So let's jump in. We got 6 of them, and we'll fly through these, but I think they're all going to be handy. We're going to give you 6 best practices that you can start acting on today in order to, really unleash this omni-channel approach to going after these cars that you need in your inventory. So let's start with, we're going to start with number 2, aren't we? No, we're going to start with number 1. Sorry, got out of order there. We're going to start with best practice number 1, which is a universal appraisal process. Now, my colleague Micah, who is the guru of Kelley Blue Book Instant Cash Offer, would normally present this slide. So I'm going to do the best I can. But what he would tell you is that we've got this really great science-based, research-based approach within Kelley Blue Book to walk a customer through the vehicle condition. We try to get them to identify all the problems with their car so we can give a real good idea of what the damage, the condition of that vehicle is. We think that this tool works great at the dealership as well, right? It's backed by a trusted source of Kelley Blue Book, and the customer might have already gone through this process anyways. So why don't we go through kind of a non-confrontational process created by someone else, not the dealership, but by a trusted source to help us identify the damage on the vehicle. So the key here is, however you do this, there's some stats that I got to call out to you that make a big difference on this universalizing this appraisal process. We did some research at Cox Automotive, and it was really around unmet needs of the auto buying consumer. And 50% of those unmet needs were solved by walking the customer around their vehicle during the appraisal process. And I know you've heard this before, but so many dealerships skip this, right? By walking around and identifying the condition with them so they could see what you found and what they maybe missed is absolutely critical. And the other thing we got to remember is the average customer today has 2.6 offers on their trade-in by the time they get to your dealership. So we got to meet them where they're at. They've already gone through a process where they've gotten numbers on these cars. So it's important that we bring them through our process, which really says now your car is physically here. Maybe some of those offers, they weren't physically here. They were just online offers, right? Subject to inspection. Now we're going to do the inspection, and we're going to really lay out what the car is worth and what the damage is associated with it. The key is here, folks, no green Sharpies, okay? Just putting, the desk manager throwing a number out there and walking out and trying to sell a number that doesn't have this process involved is not going to do anybody any good. And I just reminded, why no green Sharpies? Because I look at how Carvana and CarMax and some of these, even the large dealer groups that have stood up online systems to be able to value trades, it's so fully transparent and so easy to get a number on your car. We got to make it that way as well when they come to the dealership. Let's jump back to number 2. The next thing you want to do is just get a true baseline. And this is reconditioning costs. So this is for us, right? We got to have a reconditioning estimate that is real, okay? Can't tell you how many times I've opened up a vAuto client's system, went into the appraisal tool, and saw a default value of $1,500 in reconditioning on every car. And guess what? They never changed it. It stayed that way for every appraisal that they ever did. And when I think we can miss cars now by $300 or $400 easily, especially if somebody's already got 2.6 trade-in offers before they come to your dealerships, they know the value. It's critical that we actually put a real number on the car. We identify that and we know what we're getting ourselves into. So I love the stats that are on here because we did a deep dive study on just this very reason, because we were concerned about all these default reconditioning values in appraisals. 61% of appraisers that actually used real recon estimates, in other words, they overrode the default and actually put a number in there, and they said, hey, car needs tires, all right? It's going to need, some bumper work. It's going to need all of these things. Those 61% of those appraisers that use those got actually won 2 times as many more cars in the trade-in process, okay? That's a powerful, powerful stat that we have. And then you'll see the next one in terms of recon estimates at the time of appraisal. On average, we see them being off as much as $750 to what actually the car needed versus what they put in their appraisal, because in many cases, they might have just left it at the default and went with the average. So another big best practice for you. Number 3, now we got to put a correct value on it, okay? How do we do that? At vAuto, we are all about establishing what the retail price is and then backing into what I can pay for it, right? So we've got a lot of insights that we can use. Obviously, Kelley Blue Book has a trade-in value for that car, which the consumer has probably seen and has probably gathered. So we can start there as well. And Kelley Blue Book can be favorable to the dealer as long as the customer is truly identifying the reconditioning that, or I should say the condition of their vehicle accurately, which takes some discussion. We got to walk them back when they think it's excellent and really it's fair. But that's all about that walk around on the car and having that kind of discussion with them. We tend to, in appraisals, love MMR, right? I find this all the time, and I know it's just so tempting to say, I wonder what this car will go for at auction, even though I'm going to retail it. So we tend to look at that. My only caution to this is, I'm not going to stop you from doing that because so many dealers, want to have that benchmark in there when they're looking at an appraisal. But I would say this, look at the transactions, not the averages, all right? Drill in and look at some cars like yours, same condition and same odometer that have gone through auction before you just jump to an average value and say, oh, I think I'll just bring this appraisal down because MMR average is only X, right? Look at those transactions, drill into them if it's important for you to understand kind of where you stand from a wholesale perspective. But remember, if you're not wholesaling the car, I'm not sure what good a wholesale value does for you. It's the retail value that's important, and then we subtract our reconditioning, our costs, and back into what we think we can pay for it and leave ourselves some profit. I saw a note here. This would have been Micah's slide, and I had to read this because I thought it was fascinating, that we did a study and that it was almost last year, it was almost cost the dealer $600 to acquire a customer last year. It's the most expensive acquisition cost in history. So again, how valuable is putting the right number, getting the customer in the right mindset, and getting that trade and getting this inventory that we're all hungry for? It's probably one of the most important processes in the dealership. It used to be trying to close a sale, but I would argue that we got to get their car if they have one first, because that's potentially going to give us 2 sales, right? They're going to trade their car in, we're going to get the car they're buying, and then we're going to get another car on the lot, which we desperately need to be able to make gross profit on. So number 4, tame the consistencies among appraisers. I've gone into vAuto, and I was a performance manager for 3.5 years, so I was in the app, day in, day out on a regular basis. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen inconsistencies amongst appraisers. And when I say, okay, so maybe there's inconsistencies in terms of look to book or trade capture rate, yeah, you're going to see those. But I'm talking about what they're saying the price to market for that car should be, and then backing into what they think the cost to market should be in order to make their offer to the customer. That can be all over the place. So when we talk about this universal trade process and looking across all the channels, it's important that appraisers have an objective. They know that I don't want to pay 102% cost to market for an auction car and then expect to get a trade-in for 76% cost to market. I'm letting somebody walk at 76%, right? But I'll turn around and pay all the money for an auction car. And then there's kind of everything in between. There's your service drive, there's your lease returns, all the things that, you know, we have to be consistent in what we're willing to put in our cars, and we have to inspect what we expect, right? We have to know who's putting the money on the cars, what is the cost to market on average that they're doing, and then look at all of my appraisers across the entire universe who's, you know, got that checkbook out trying to buy cars, and make sure that we have consistency there. The key is being able to track that and make it real visible from a reporting standpoint. And then we want to measure across channels. So now we're going to make this even more complex, right? So if I am looking at look to book, which is typically my trade-ins, the trades that come to the curb, now I got to dig down deeper and say, how am I doing in capturing service drive cars? How am I doing in capturing my trade-in leads, lease returns, auction cars, trade-in, all the way across, right? And looking at those cost to markets and those look to book capture rates across all of them. This is how you really put this omni-channel strategy together. And we fill in all those zeros that I mentioned in the box where we're getting some cars from every channel into our inventory. And then we can evaluate which ones we do the best with, right? Now, I will say the one thing I love about measuring look to book is I believe, and you say, hey, let's put our money where our mouth is. And I said earlier that that might be the most important process in the dealership today with this supply constraint situation is I want to measure my look to book, my trade capture rate all the way down to my salespeople, especially when it comes to interfacing with a customer. And for me, the best dealers that I have seen, they put money on that, right? They have their look to book posted in their conference room, all right? They pay spiffs based on salespeople doing a great job of winning trades in that situation. They pay them when salespeople go out to the general public and find cars that people are willing to sell back to the dealership, right? You need everybody, all hands on deck out there, multi-sourcing, omni-channel sourcing across all of these opportunities. The last one, number 6, re-engaging customers who say no today. So we used to do save a deal, right? We have a really cool approach to this now, and it's in the next slide. So, but let me give you some stats to give you an idea of why we think this is so important. So we found that 89% of the instant cash offer transactions that we see coming through Kelley Blue Book actually take place after the offer has expired, okay? That used to be that 53% of those customers transacted in the first 7 days, right? All right, so now we're seeing that even though we're making them an offer at Kelley Blue Book and we're giving them a number on their car, they're taking a lot longer to transact. So the follow-up time around these folks has been extended significantly. I don't think a lot of dealers are aware of that. I don't know what our follow-up processes are and how hungry we are within the time someone gets a trade offer or they came in and got a number on their car and how aggressively we follow up. But now we are talking, months afterwards that we should be touching these folks. And I think that's important to really build up an aggressive and robust follow-up system for these folks that we're putting on the money. And we know that they just may not be ready to roll yet. It doesn't mean they're going to the next dealership to consummate a deal. They're just thinking about it, and we want to stay with them. Now, we built a tool to help dealers in vAuto to help with this re-engagement kind of process and engagement of customers coming into your service drive. This is my new favorite integration, by the way. And in vAuto, you can see your service appointments. If you have Xtime or Vin Solutions as one of your providers, we're able to bring those service appointments in. We're able to give them a scorecard rating. We're able to tell you if you need some of those cars in inventory based on your current travel rate. And we're able to direct you to this page to really work those customers by creating an appraisal, and even better now, create a KBB instant cash offer. Okay, so you can send an invite to that customer when you know they're coming into the service drive, which I have heard by many best practice dealers in the service drive. Always ask for permission to appraise someone's car before they come in. It kind of creates a so much better engagement when the customer actually gets in there, so they know that you're going to be doing this. So let them know, hey, you're bringing your car in for service. I want to confirm your appointment's X, and we would love to appraise your car while it's in here. It's going to be up on the rack anyways. We can walk around and we can give you a no obligation value on your car. What better way than to give them a KBB instant cash offer value, right? So that has been real effective for dealers. And we now have this automated within vAuto for you to send an invite, create an offer, and then you can, while the car's in service, do that walk around that we talked about and actually give them a formal offer. So let's look at a couple dealers, that are doing it right. And I will show you that there are there's a Toyota dealer here. I got two Toyota dealers, actually. We're going to look at these side by side. And you'll notice in the different channels across the top exactly how well they're doing in that inventory side. I think I'm one slide off. I'm sorry. Let me get me to, there he is. I'm sorry. Had a couple extra slides in there. So let's get to this one here. So look across the left-hand side, was across the top. Look across the left-hand side. We got our trade-in, auction, service drive, lease return. These are our channels. These are our sources. And let's just see how Toyota dealer number one is doing. You'll notice that, do the fast math here, about 66% of their inventory is coming in from trade-in and auction, about 34% from other channels. Okay, so a really robust auction strategy here. Nothing wrong with that, okay? They're out being able to supplement their cars through the auction, and they're able to get inventory accordingly. My recommendation to this dealer was, if you're doing successful and able to get cars out of the auction and turn those cars with velocity, which typically we need to do because those cars are probably bronze cars, as we call them in profit time, kind of low potential cars because of what we have to pay for them. Hey, I get it, right? You're generating that F&I profit, you're generating that service profit, but for this dealer, I would say you're just starting to scratch the surface on that service drive, right? So build up that process. The great thing is that's not a zero. So they do have a service drive strategy, which is important, but I would say put some more energy into that. Because if you look down that right-hand column, we have a profit time scoring system from 1 to 12. You'll see that, those auction cars are about 1.8 in profit time. That means market, return on investment potential. Those service drive cars are 7s, right? So the more of those we can get in, probably higher gross opportunities. The second Toyota dealer has really got it going on, right? They've got it going on almost every channel that's available. And look at the service drive effort they have, acquiring 36 cars out of their service drive. Look at those profit time scores across the right-hand column there, from the trade-ins to service drive. I mean, their service drive cars actually have a higher profit time score than their trade-ins, right? So that is really fertile ground out there to be able to pull those cars in. I mean, they've got KBB ICO leads. They're buying cars from the street robustly. They're doing sight unseen appraisals out there and still working the auction. But I think the key to the auction is they are buying a little bit all the time, rather than getting into this situation where, hey, I need 20 cars right now. So I go buy 20 cars at auction because I need inventory desperately. That doesn't allow us to maximize the opportunity at the auction and get the right cars that we need and be able to just bring those in as supplemental inventory. So we are at the forward-looking takeaways, my last slide, and I want to end on a real positive note because some of the data that I showed you earlier was like, okay, we're still in a battle here. Things are tough, right? Well, I got some real optimism for you here, right? If we look at the retail used car forecasts, All right. Now, we're not looking at total used car transactions. That's always in that 40 million number you get thrown around. We're talking about retail transactions that go through dealerships. Okay. If you look at that, take out those private party sales and all that, Cox Automotive sees a 3% increase next year as we come out of this year going into 2024. As a matter of fact, we actually see that those retail transactions being better than 2022. And 2022 wasn't a bad year. All right. So there is going to be some upside. We're not looking for it to fall off the cliff and for things to get much more difficult. There's always economic factors that play in that could change that. But right now, it looks pretty good. The interest rates, we believe, have peaked, right? And we don't think those auto loans are gonna climb up much higher. So what we're dealing with is what we got, right? Now we work with what we've been dealt with here, and all car folks are super sharp operators. They know how to get people financed and get things done. And then finally, that depreciation risk is starting to soften a little bit, right? Those crazy high spikes in prices at the auction, we think, are subsiding a little bit, and there's probably some our future ahead looks a little bit brighter than all this crazy volatility in the wholesale market. So all in all, I hope that the 6 best practices that we just shared will get you on your way to a great second half of 23, a great 24, and really find the inventory you need to capitalize on this used car market. Thanks, Emma.
Yeah, Patrick, hi, I'm here. That was a great presentation. I actually made some notes, and I think even the way you started it with framing up what affordability really means right now, and just, people are spending more on used than they were on new. Street purchase, through the roof. I mean, it's just so interesting. So we have some questions here. We have some time for questions. So I'm going to turn it over to the audience now, okay? So, yeah, let's do it. So, okay. And, you talked about the service drive, and I think that was really key, what you said about also letting the customer know that you're going to be looking at their car to appraise it. So this question here says, service drive seems to be a newer acquisition channel. I haven't explored this channel yet. How do I get started? So do you have any advice on that, on how to get started?
Yeah, I'm a big believer, and we do it internally in our software development as well, which we kind of have this crawl, walk, run approach, right? Because the problem is, if you go benchmark the best dealer that's out there that's putting some service drive process in place, without all the tools and the evolution, you usually end up getting burnt out, and whoever you've set out there to go find cars in the service drive is, quits in the first couple of weeks because there's just too much there, right? So yeah. My approach to this is I would, at minimum, start getting those service appointments visible inside a system. And then more importantly, come up with a criteria. We help you with this a lot in vAuto, but come up with a criteria, which are the best cars that are in my service drive. And just start with doing appraisals on those cars as they are in there, and providing this kind of no obligation offer. If you're connected with Kelly Blue Book Instant Cash Offer, you can use that mechanism. Come up with something that I can make an offer to those customers while they're in there, and they can actually see what their car is worth. Again, what you're trying to do is intercept that customer before they've already thought of, hey, I wonder if I should go type my car into Carvana.com, or I should get a hold of CarMax. You're trying to get in front of that and see if you can create a conversation before that happens.
Yeah, CarMax buying, what was it, 360,000
327,000 cars off the street. Yeah, crazy.
A small car company. Okay. Auctions, you talked a lot about auctions. And there's a question here about, just someone saying, we still need auction. How do we make sure we buy them at the right price? I'm sure everyone's always thinking that, but do you have any advice on that? Yeah.
I'll go back to my omni-channel approach, right? So if I were to do omni-channel in auction, it would be looking at, as many auctions as possible, right? I think that most people, when they go to auction, there's still a few out there that, go to the same 3 lanes, every week, and they try to buy cars out of there. And I think the key to buying auction cars right is all in the pre-work. So it is working, the available supply, identifying cars in a buy list that you need to meet your strategy. You're not bringing stuff back that people go, oh my gosh, what'd you buy those for? There's a strategy that everybody in the dealership agrees with. Those are the kind of cars we need. And then when I go in and I know what my retail potential is on those cars, you might, nobody likes this, but you might find yourself being able to pay a little more and actually win some cars because you have a real strong retail environment for that particular car. And I'm a true believer in going further out, casting a wider net, and really going out where the wrong car got traded in the wrong market at the wrong time and ended up in an auction that nobody's really interested in that car. You start finding cars that you do well with in your market that you can go out. It easily pays for the transportation costs to get that car back in. So casting that wider net's important too.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that role has gotten a lot tougher for that person at the store that's having to do that prep work?
I think so. I mean, it's homework, right? Yeah. Who wants to do homework? So I will tell you, there is, we've got our Stockwave technology. There is technology out there that can make this much faster and more efficient for you. I think you got to lean in there if you're going to get serious. But I will say that buying a handful of cars a week is a much better strategy than I mentioned earlier, which is, oh my gosh, it's getting towards the end of the month. We have no cars. We didn't get the trades we thought. Let's go buy 25 or 30 cars, late model rental rockets, and just throw them out on a lot and see what happens. That's where I find, folks getting caught with massive depreciation, and the auction guy is, on the blacklist for at least a couple of weeks.
Yeah, exactly. Well, those tools you've got that you've mentioned sound worth pursuing. There's a question here. I think this is kind of around the street purchase. What is a good buying pitch to private party sellers who are usually looking for retail money for their vehicle?
Well, I think one, you got to get them engaged, right? So you got to let them know that, first of all, I am a viable outlet for you, because they have this hope and prayer that they're going to sell it to some other private party that has done no homework, and they're just going to pay them all the money for it, right?
Yeah.
And that happens sometimes. So if that happens,
and that doesn't even get into like the creepy factor for me personally. Much better to just deal with the dealer.
That's a great point, Emma. I wasn't going to bring that up, and you nailed it, because I think there are a lot of people out there that are kind of like, oh, do I really want to do this? I got to meet him in the parking lot, right? Because I don't want him to know where I live, and all those types of things. So yes, you are an easier way for them to get rid of their car, but they have to believe that they can get a respectable value for the car. And I'll just go back to the whole concept of not using your number and this is what we'll offer you. It is, let's look at what some of the other trusted sources out there would say your car's worth. Now, the beautiful thing is, if you can provide that number, but obviously you've done your homework and this is a car you could really do well with, and you can bump that number a little bit, now we got a great conversation to have, right? So I ran your car through Kelley Blue Book Instant Cash Offer or whatever, and I came up with this. This is probably what the car is worth. But I'll tell you what, we do really well with these. And if I could give you another $300 over and above that, would that make sense for you and not have to deal with this private party selling thing? So.
Yeah, I think that's great. And because you had spent time also talking about doing that walk around, taking them around their car, because a lot of people completely forget the dings and the scratches and the stuff that's happened over, the life of the car. And then it's completely transparent. I mean, how can you be even more transparent? You can't. You're letting them in. So, all good points. So there's a question here about the instant cash offer resource. And Phil is asking, how does the send invite tool to the KBB instant cash offer resource get delivered to the customer when it's pulled from vAuto?
So that, and you know, I'm a little out of my wheelhouse. This is where my man Micah would come in hard, right? But I'm going to give it a shot. And I have marketing people like, you know, watching me going, if he screws this up, we'll be able to follow up with you.
Yeah.
But the send an invite button is to reach out with an email to say, we would like to perform an instant cash offer. And then as I understand it, is actually a link where they can open up the instant cash offer portal and walk through, do their own condition assessment if they want to do that prior to coming to the store. But at minimum, they at least get that link that says, hey, we'd like to do this. And then, you know, the backdrop to that might be if you've got a ability to follow up, maybe it's your BDC or whatever who, you know, confirms your service appointments anyways, and say, hey, did you get our invite? We'd love to do that instant cash offer. Oh, yeah, I did. I haven't had time to do it. No problem. If you're okay with it, we'll go ahead and perform that while we're in the store because your car is going to be there anyways. And we'll send one of our appraisers to go back there and do the condition assessment for you. And then we can see, you know, where we land afterwards. So I think it's kind of a multi-pronged approach, but it's alerting them that this is going to happen and then letting them know it's the Kelley Blue Book's behind it. It's not us just coming in and saying, hey, I looked at your car while I was back there and, you know, yeah. I got my, I use the green Sharpie because I was in retail for a number of years and I wanted to burn all the green Sharpies, but, you know, and they write them out on there and hand them something, you know, handwritten on a piece of paper. So.
Yeah, totally. And you're getting a lot of questions about instant cash offer and appraisals. So I'm going to put this question in here now. So you talked about a universal appraisal process, which I think was really interesting. What are the first steps to getting that put into place with my appraisers? The person's asking.
Okay, say that one more time. Give me that one.
Yeah. So what are the first steps to getting the universal appraisal process? What are the first steps to getting that put into place with with a dealer's appraisal people?
Yep. Yeah. I'm with you. Yep. So I think kind of how you start is get a little more organization around the people that are actually authorized to do appraisals. I find in the dealership, and you can really, this really rings true when you log into someone's vAuto account and you look at the appraisal page and you'll see 15 appraisers and you got 3 of them that are doing 80% of the appraisals. And then you just got these onesie twosies all the way down, right? And those onesie twosies kind of add up, right? So if they don't have any objective or any idea of what the dealership's goals are, or how we're trying to bring in cars from a cost to market standpoint, those could be cars that either you're not getting or you're paying too much for. And that's just enough to screw up your inventory, to be quite honest. So I think, first of all, you got to kind of circle the wagons and say, who's going to appraise cars? And are we meeting on a regular basis and sharing our strategy in terms of what our cost to market objective is? What are we willing to put in a car? And then I love the rule that a lot of dealers do, where they say, if you're going to go outside of our cost to market objective, like you need to put more in a car to be able to step up and win the trade, you need to phone a friend, right? So you need to get someone else on the team to take a quick look at it and say, am I just crazy here? Or do we really need this car? And this fits our profile perfectly. And then it all seems to work. So you're going to have some outliers, but you're going to have some collaboration around it. And that doesn't always happen in dealerships, right? Everybody's a little bit of a lone wolf. So I think trying to get that will help kind of this universal process that we're recommending.
So don't let anybody go rogue on these appraisals. First and foremost, check yourself. Just a comment here. The walk around is a show. Give them the show. Thank you, Jose. You know, you've talked a lot about, you know, strategies with the cash offer. Marty is interested in this. He's saying the auction has been very inconsistent with the condition reports and the arbitration policies have become more difficult. So we always have made street purchases, and Marty's very interested in learning more about KBB instant cash offer best strategies. I think you've covered a lot of them. Is there anything else you wanted to add here?
You know, I don't think so. I hear there has been an amazing, and I go to Used Car Week every year, and that particular conference is very focused on remarketing of cars and what the latest technologies that are happening really in the auction space and all that. And I will tell you that help is on the way. I mean, there's been a tremendous amount of investment made, and I know by Manheim as well, on being able to make more consistency around condition reports. We've got multi-stage, cameras and lighting. We're driving the car through these tunnels, and I mean, it's just some amazing things that are going on that I think is going to make that a lot better for a lot. Now we got AI, right? Artificial intelligence. It's going to tell you if there is a problem with that particular quarter panel, instead of us taking our thumb and running along there to see if there's been anything done. So
yeah,
help is on the way. I think the industry recognizes that, and it's going to get a whole lot better. I think when it comes to the private party side of it, the dealers that I've seen that have done really well, it's got to be there's got to be a strategy. You can't kind of toy with it, right? It almost needs to be that kind of buying center setup. I'm not saying you got to necessarily have a facility, but the ones that I've seen are successful really even almost brand the buying center separate from the dealership to just say, we buy cars, right? And we're just interested in buying your car. There's no string, and that's number one importance, no strings attached in terms of you having to buy another car from us. When that conversation starts to take place, that's when the consumer, based on research, starts to get turned off. They're like focused on one thing at a time. I got this car to get rid of. Yeah, I'll probably have to replace it, but what can I get for my car right now? Let's get that figured out. And if I like you, we'll talk about something else. If I don't, I'll just sell you my car and I'll go somewhere else to find what I like. So I think separating those two is real important as well.
I think that's great advice. Okay. Probably an easy question for you to answer. Will KBB send that customer offer to all of their dealers?
No, I think the lead routing in KBB is only by geography. Doesn't only go to, you said, I'm sorry, if you do by the way, the internal, I think maybe that's where they're going there.
Yeah.
So if I do an invite, If I do an invite out of my service appointments, no, I own that. That's mine, right? So I've sent that lead, and if I can get that customer to do a KBB instant cash offer, that's where I thought you were just talking about in general. We don't send all our leads to every dealer anyways, but there are multiple dealers in a geography that can get them. But no, that would be your offer to them. We're just trying to give you a tool in order to help you have a third-party trusted source that you're connected with, and that you can get them I think you have to have the expert appraisal functionality, which is their way of being able to evaluate the car in the KBB fashion, and then they'll be able to get that offer from you.
Okay. Another question I think people are wondering about, this is from Aaron. What is considered a good cost to market percentage these days, in your opinion?
Well, if you read any of Dale's books, it used to be about 84 to 85% was the cost to market target. Now, I do a heavy sigh when I say that, because you're going, yeah, try to buy a car at auction for 85%. I get it. It's an average. Okay. So we would expect your trade appraisals to be a lower cost to market, because what do you get to do in a trade appraisal? You get to sell that number to the customer. And we know car people know how to sell really, really well, right? And so they're able sometimes to sell a number that you never thought you could get and get that customer to do the deal. So we would hope, based on your salesmanship, that you would be able to get lower numbers on your trades. And that's important because if, let's say, you're sourcing 17% of your inventory, I think is what the survey said, from the auction, you might be paying 96, 97, 98% cost to market for those cars at auction. But here's the deal, right? Knowing that when a car comes in from the auction that you own for more than what you really want, you have to have a different strategy. And that's kind of our variable management methodology. You got to have a different strategy for moving that car quickly, because it's going to depreciate faster. And you know what you have when you bring it in. That trade, however, might be one of these platinum cars or high potential cars that you're able to bring in. And we believe you can sit on that car a little bit longer and get all the money for it. So I would say that again, I love the 85% cost to market target, but that's going to vary by store depending on your channel mix that's coming in. It may have to go higher in order to have an objective. The key is you have an objective. Like everybody knows what you're trying to accomplish and you're going after it.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've got time for about one more question. And I know there's more questions here than we can fit in, but let's talk about electric cars for a second. So Roberto has asked a couple of questions around electric cars. It sounds like in general, the people coming in that want to unload them are expecting a lot higher than they can give them. And basically one of his questions here is, do you think electric cars have to be bought a lot under retail? Any electric car we get never sells. So have you seen anything different with electric cars in this space?
Yeah, I'm walking on eggshells. Be very careful on this one because there's a lot of passion around electric cars.
It's so political, Patrick. Like, my goodness, when you talk about electric cars, it's wow. So I get it.
And I every week I get a new article that says electric cars are sitting on used cars lots. And to what he just said, we never sell one, right? Like we can't resell them. I think that, and I know that Cox Automotive has put a significant investment in being able to evaluate the battery life of cars. And I don't think the industry has mastered that yet. It's coming, and they're figuring it out. But I think, as we look at a car and you go, dude, it's got 270,000 miles on it, right? I mean, there's only so much life left in that car. We can kind of have a rational discussion around it. I don't know that we know what the life is left of an EV, and what does a EV consumer fear, unless they're leasing it as a new car when they go, oh, great, I'll just turn it in, is how much life is left, right? And I hear these batteries are, 50% of the cost of the car. I don't want to get stuck with that problem, right? So I would say that we're in a kind of a tweener right now on electric vehicles, but I do know that technology is coming fast and furious. And that's where the industry's got to get. We have to have the ability to tell people, we got Carfax, right? We need a battery version of that to be able to say, this is what's left on it. And I think that will help us put better values in EVs, in my opinion.
Yeah, because we actually did a webinar with Cox Mobility, and it's this issue, like you said, the tweener, where things need to be standardized even within those actual products so that people know what to look for and people know how to appraise them properly.
Right. So not a great answer other than, hey, here's your fuzzy response.
I think it's a great answer. I think even like bringing it up and talking about it is a good thing. I think we're just about out of time, Patrick.
Okay.
And
thank you, Emma. I always enjoy doing these with you. I appreciate it.
Likewise.
All is well in Toronto. Keep the smoke up there with you, please. All right, up to the north.
We'll try and keep it up here. And Micah, if you're watching, somehow we got through this without you, but for sure next time. So that brings us to the end of our webinar. Thanks to today's audience for the questions. If you asked a question that we didn't get a chance to answer, our friends at Cox Automotive will follow up by email. If you learned something from this session, please tell your peers about it. The recording will be available in about an hour. You'll find it at autonews.com/webinars. When the webinar ends, a survey will pop up on your screen. We genuinely appreciate your feedback as it helps us create future webinars that are even more beneficial to you. Thanks again to Patrick and Cox Automotive for bringing us this presentation, and to you for joining us. On behalf of everyone at Automotive News, have a great rest of your day.